Hello and welcome to the Divorce to Bliss podcast. Here you will learn all things related to healing from divorce, mind, body, and spirit, so you can create a beautiful new life filled with happiness. I'm Rachel Ruby, author of Divorce to Bliss, divorce coach, speaker, and attorney, and I'm so glad you found me here. Hello and welcome to the Divorce to Bliss podcast. I've been really looking forward to this episode today because I will be chatting with the one and only Wendy Paige Sterling. Wendy is an intuitive life and business coach, and she focuses on helping people through life transitions so that they can become empowered, so that they can experience personal growth and learn all about using intuition. So without further ado, I welcome you, Wendy, to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here and to have a conversation with you. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. First, why don't we start with you telling our listeners and viewers about your story and how you came to be where you are and have this amazing ability to help people. Share away.
Yeah. So, my whole world completely came crumbling down about 7 years ago when very unexpectedly I discovered that my now ex-husband was having an affair. And it was one of those wake-up call moments where I felt the biggest punch in my gut. And what I now coin that as is my intuition really punching me and telling me to wake up, that I had really been asleep at the wheel of my marriage and had really, just had become a version of myself that others expected me to be instead of really owning and being authentically Wendy. And so it took me pretty much like the next, 8 to 9 months to really come to a place where I finally understood that my whole life I had been raised to, fit into this identity, to be this version of me. And I very much brought that into my marriage. And really me standing in my power meant ending the people pleasing. It meant ending the need for external validation to know who I was or to even feel confident in who it was that I am. And so it was really through that life transition of separation and then ultimately my decision of filing for divorce that it took me to finally understand that who I was, who I had become, all the experiences that I had been through, that I was a completely different person from the day that I got married. And ultimately, what filing for divorce meant was choosing me. And so my divorce, while it was my story, as I'm sure some of your listeners define as their story too, what I have come to realize over time, and like I said, it's been 7 years, is really that's just one piece of my puzzle. It was my first big pivot that I experienced in my life. The next one being that I chose to leave corporate. I left my corporate 6-figure cushy paycheck. That was the decision that I made. It was kind of one of those, I am Wendy and I am now getting divorced. I'm going to be single. I want a new career. I don't need to ask permission and I'm just going to do this. And I gave myself 2 years and I said, okay, you've got 2 years to figure this out. And I'm happy to say that it took me 18 months to replace my corporate paycheck by going out and becoming an entrepreneur. And so my trend started becoming like the more I started embodying who I was, the more I was being authentically me, the call it success. But to me, I really define it as me being able to really increase the abundance that I was having in my life, whether that be through relationships, connections, through business with my kids, dating, which I finally started doing. And ultimately what I was learning to do was to really become this life transition expert, right? No matter what life kept throwing at me, I was thriving and pushing through. And, the next pivot coming to me was, losing my mom who passed away in January of 2022 from ovarian cancer. And while I knew that the inevitable was happening when she got her diagnosis, I also was able, had I not been through and learned how to process my emotions through my divorce, I wouldn't have been able to manage losing my mom, who was my best friend, and really seeing that her passing just meant that she would be communicating with me in a different way. And the communication that she shared with me was it was time for another pivot. It was time for me to shift out and to stop allowing my divorce to be my only story, and to let it be a catalyst for it being a piece of my story. And really ultimately what I'm now doing, as you know, I've been sort of in this transition period for 7 years, but, shifting myself more into really helping other people to see how life transitions can be those pivotal moments that really empower us to shift the trajectory of our life, to be that catalyst for growth, and ultimately to see how from day one of me paying attention to my intuition, how I've really been able to create the business and the life that I truly feel in my highest and best interest, and to let that be my guide. And so really learning how to lead with my heart in making those decisions instead of allowing my mind to take over and try to control, keep me safe. But ultimately what it was doing was keeping me stuck. And so I sit here now, having built my second business, and, again, it being another 6-figure business that I have built in an even shorter period of time than I did the first time. And, really wanting to help other people to see what is possible when you allow your intuition to guide you, because it's never going to steer you wrong, but your ego will.
Yeah. Gosh, that's beautiful. And you touched on so many things. I feel like let's chat for 2 or 3 hours, but, what comes out the most to me is, same thing with my clients. When I talk to clients, I talk a lot about many of the things you said, standing in your truth and listening to your intuition. And, I think what I notice with a lot of people regarding intuition is that many of us know we have intuition, or some people don't believe in that, right? But some people think, oh yeah, I just had this feeling I should not do that, or I should go that way instead of that way. And so I did it, or I didn't do it, or whatever. But the hardest thing I think for a lot of people who don't know how to listen to their intuition, or maybe don't even believe in intuition, is, how to get started learning to listen to that. I mean, obviously that's what you're there for, and I help with that as well. But I mean, what would you advise our listeners if they wanted to start this journey on tapping into their intuition? What can they do?
Yeah, intuition speaks differently to everybody. So my experience of my intuition talking to me could be very different from somebody else's. Ultimately, what I try to educate my clients on in being able to understand what their intuition means to them is really understanding where physically it's stirring the pot, so to speak, right? So for me, it is very much in my gut. My intuition is that gut feeling when I instinctively know that something is off, that something doesn't feel right, right? So it can also be a moment where, it can feel like a hunch. I've had clients tell me that their intuition, they feel it in their chest. I've had people tell me, same thing, they feel it in their gut. I've had people tell me that they get a pain in their head. It can be anything and anything to everybody, right? It's really just getting to learning to pay attention to your body and where that physical sensation is coming in, and being able to first identify it there. Because what ends up happening is we feel it, we ignore it, but then our mind just goes on autopilot, and that's when your ego kicks in. And so your intuition is really something that it's a muscle. It's a muscle to build and to start paying attention to. But for some reason, and again, this was my experience, and I'm curious to know if you've had the same one, but I was taught that my intuition was wrong. I was taught that experiences that I was having related to my intuition were wrong. And so I stopped listening and I stopped paying attention. And so your intuition is typically soft. It's typically quiet. And so I learned to ignore it because why am I listening to that? I've got this really loud voice over here that's guiding me and telling me what to do. And the difference too between like knowing what is your intuition versus what's not is your intuition's typically going to feel illogical. It's not going to make sense to you because you're going to be like, wait, what? What's going on?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's not like, it's almost like your intuition. It has like a knowledge that doesn't exist in the human world. It has a knowledge that is on such a higher subconscious level that it takes practice and it takes like a new muscle that you build to be able to start listening to it and paying attention to it.
Yeah.
Because it's quick. Like it's a second.
Right.
Versus like when it's your ego, it's like this long dialogue. It's like, it's got this monologue on stage, right? Versus your intuition, it's a hit. Boom. And you're just like, wait, what just happened? What did it just say? Like, what?
So it sounds like one of the ways to start really tapping into it is to kind of focus on those quick sensations, wherever they may be, or those quick messages that you're getting, and kind of let the ego just calm down and not go into this whole, because like you said, it is something very quick usually. And if you start going into that dialogue within your own mind about, oh, should I do, should I not do it? It's what's going to happen. Oh, that doesn't feel safe. I'm going to be stepping out of my comfort zone. I mean, whatever it is, you've missed that. That feeling that you had may be gone, right? Mm-hmm. So even though you might acknowledge that, yes, I had that feeling that I should do that, you've now talked yourself out of it or talked yourself into staying within that comfort zone. So
exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I didn't, I don't, it's interesting when you just said about being kind of told to ignore it. I don't think that I ever was told not to follow my intuition. I don't know that it was ever really talked about when I was growing up. I think I have always been very highly intuitive. And maybe when I was a kid, I didn't know what it meant. But as I kind of, grew older, and I think I always considered myself more mature than many of the people that I knew at the time as I was growing up. And so I think as I grew up, I just started to instinctively trust that. And I don't remember, did I ever talk to my parents about that? But I remember my mother told me stories about her intuition. Like one in particular, I always remembered when she was driving on the freeway with my father. This was maybe 30, 40 years ago. And all of a sudden she said, get off the freeway now. And my father said, what are you talking about? She's like, get off. And she was so, like, get off the freeway. Yes. Right? And he did. And a minute later, this huge semi-tractor trailer started swerving. There was a huge accident with a pileup of cars.
Ooh,
and it was right where they were. I know. So I remember hearing that story as a teenager and thinking to myself, wow, my mom felt something was going to happen. I've had that happen. But I don't know. You're right. I don't know that it's something that most people talk about with their children. So it's an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah. My childhood, it was, I'm first generation here in the US. So it was all about fitting in, being American and not standing out. And so anytime, like I was highly intuitive as a little girl, I saw and spoke to spirit. I have very vivid memories. I was told that they were imaginary friends. I was told not to talk about it. And you guys, please know, like, I love my family. I'm super close to my family. And there was this, image that I was taught to live into. Mm-hmm. And so, anytime my intuition felt like I should say something, I was told I was wrong. I was told to sit down and be quiet. I was a girl, right? I'm fitting into America. You be a cute little girl, sit, be pretty. You've got, you're supposed to be, seen, not necessarily heard. And right. I always say, like, I was born very outspoken and with a microphone in my hand, and that didn't jive with fitting into a new country. And so for me, it was something that I learned to tune out, because it was fear of not receiving love from my family.
Yeah.
And so I tuned it out, and I tuned it out my entire marriage. I tuned it out until that day, and I have not stopped listening to it since. And because of that, I've created the most incredible life for myself by listening to it. But please don't get me wrong. I don't sit here and, like, I'm a human being, and I have days where my ego gets involved and I cry and I wonder what the hell I'm doing. And I wonder, like, should I be doing this? Like, did I just make a big mistake? Like, I'm human and I have these moments, but it's being able to learn and to know how to tap back in to that higher self, to that guidance, to know that, like, yes, everything is going to be okay. But it's human to wander at times. So, I'm not sitting here being like, yeah, I do this every day. It's perfect. And, it's anything but. I mean, I had a moment this morning. I'm like on, Voxer with my coach, and I'm having this full, like, self-doubt moment. And she just was like, okay, let's take a breath. I'm like, okay. And, like, I got through it. Right. But it's important that you learn how to tap back into it in order for you to be able to, it's not like being human ever goes away. It's learning how to come back to, that higher version of yourself more quickly, because it's life. This is what you go through. It happens for you to be able to, like, tap back in all these different moments.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And I tell people that all the time, and that it's, they get so down on themselves. Like, why didn't I? I say, well, because you're human and you were having a moment of doubt or a moment of, insecurity or whatever it is. And that's okay. That's okay. Yes. We can't let the ego get in and get upset, because it's okay. It's okay that we didn't take the right path. And I love two things that I wanted to come back on that you said. One is about being a woman, being a young girl. You were a young girl and you kind of felt like you couldn't speak out. I too am very outspoken. I always have been. In fact, people my whole life are like, oh, why did you go to the HR and talk about that person doing this to the other person? I'm like, because that just wasn't a cool thing. Like, no one should be treated that way, right? So yes, I have a big mouth. I'm a lawyer. Put my foot in my mouth, but whatever. And I think, though, in this, even now, even at 2023, I think women have made a lot of strides, a lot of progress, but we're still not equal, despite what anyone says. Everyone says, oh, now we have equal pay. We're still not equal with men. So if a man makes a comment that is very strong about something, or, normally that's okay. But oftentimes, if a woman does that, even in a corporate setting, you've been in a corporate setting, I've been in a corporate setting, even in that setting where there's a very, high level woman, if she makes a certain comment, it's not going to be off a lot. Not all the time, but sometimes that comment will not be received in the same manner because she's a woman. Yeah. And I think this happens in a lot of cultures as well. Many cultures,
absolutely,
woman walks behind the man. The woman, she stays home, takes care of kids. The man is the one who goes out and works and makes the big decisions. And so that is really sending a message to many little girls that may have this intuition that we need to be quiet, zip it up, and maybe we shouldn't say these things, right? So I think that's hard, and that really plays into trusting that intuition and learning how to listen to it, because you have these rules of society, culture, religion, whatever you want to call it, that tell you that that's not okay.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. So that was one thing I thought was interesting. The other thing you brought up was the divorce. And I'd love to dive into this with you, because I, of course, being an outspoken woman, being someone who trusts her intuition, for many years towards the end of my marriage, was very unhappy. And I decided not to trust my intuition and explore that for a long time, which looking back now, it's very clear to me, but at the time, I think my thought process was, this will get fixed. I'm a fixer. It's all going to work out. Just, I'm unhappy right now. I don't know why I'm unhappy, but, I can't deal with it because I'm too busy. And I don't want to go there why? Because of fear, right? There's fear when you start thinking, why don't you want to go and explore that? Why don't you want to listen to that little voice or that feeling you're having? It's always fear of what's going to happen, what you're going to, let out of the box, so to speak, how your life might change. And I don't think in those last few years that I personally thought about any of that. And in the back of my head, if I really sat down and started to deconstruct it, I would have said, oh yeah, God, I'm afraid. Divorce, but a lot of people go through that and it is so common. So how do we, when we start having these feelings, what can people do? How should they look at this? Should they, find someone right away to talk to? Should they, I know you talk a lot about taking a pause, and I love that. And that's the name of your podcast, right?
Yes.
So The Power in the Pause. So, yes. So tell us a little bit about that and how that whole pause idea works when we are having these like conflicting emotions and fear.
Yeah, it's such a good question. And, I think that we all dread the pause because it's silent and we quiet our minds, and we avoid doing that because when we let ourselves rest, we get out of autopilot mode, and autopilot mode is comfortable, right? Check a box. Yeah, I can do this. Or, this is safe. This feels safe. And what I have come to realize is truly the most powerful messages that I have received that have never steered me wrong have been the ones that have come in those moments where I have literally just paused. I have let myself sit in the discomfort of the pause. Because what happens is when you are staying in autopilot, you are avoiding confronting the fears. You are avoiding confronting the uncertainty. And when you avoid that, you stay stuck. You wonder why you're unhappy. You wonder why you have resentment, bitterness, like insert any negative emotion that you want, right? Being stuck doesn't feel good, period. What I have learned, what I know to be true, what I have experienced over and over and over and over and over again is when you allow yourself to go there, to go and dive headfirst into the uncertainty, that is where the flow is. The flow is in the pause. The uncertainty lives in the pause, and you avoid it because you don't know what that's going to look like. But when you allow yourself to go there, all of a sudden, it's like, I describe it as like, it's like the floodgates just open, like possibilities are endless, perspectives are endless. Yeah. And so I could have sat there in my divorce and been like, it wasn't like stay married or get divorced. My pause moment was, what does choosing me look like? Period. It's not if I'm married or divorced. It's like, what do I want? What does choosing me look like? What is that life? And does he fit? Because my kids are coming with me no matter what, right? They were 7 and 10 at the time. Like, they're coming with me. I'm not going to take them away from their dad either. But what does my life look like? Right? Wrapping my mind around, how do I want to feel? Who do I want to be? What do I want to be doing? What do I want in a partner? Like, how do I want to be in a relationship? What does that relationship get to look like for me? And so ultimately, what I used the pause for was learning what choosing me looked like, what it meant, what it felt like, why. And honestly, finding the power in choosing me. Oh, yeah. Because no one else was going to do it. I was sitting there waiting for him to choose me. Like, and I remember it. I mean, Rachel, I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember sitting in our therapist's office, our marriage counselor, therapist office. I remember sitting on either side of the couch and looking at him and going, so what do you choose? And him going, I still don't know.
Interesting.
And in that moment, I'm getting full body chills. In that moment,
Yeah, me too.
Looking at him and saying, I choose me and I'm done. I want a divorce.
So empowering. So I have chills everywhere. That is just, oh my God. And I so resonate with that. And I've been there and I love that. I love that you figured that out, because a lot of people cannot figure that out on their own. They need that kind of guidance, right? And I love, this is just like you said, it's like opening the floodgates. I feel like you're opening this cage and all these doves are just flying out, because you have learned the most important lesson of your life. And that is that you need to put you first. You need to listen to what you want. That's the whole thing. We're done. Okay. Everyone's healed now. Get it, everybody. You just choose you. No, but it's, that is what the healing process is all about. And I love that you said those words. So.
Yeah. Cause like people come to me and they're like, I don't know if I should, they'll come and say like, I don't know if I should stay or if I should go, if I should this. I'm like, well, what do you want? Like, what does choosing you look like? And not worrying about the marriage. Like, what does choosing you? Because so many of us lose ourselves, right?
Yeah, for sure.
We lose our identity. And sometimes it's so subconscious, right? Like we're mom, we're wife, we're daughter, we're sister, we're daughter-in-law, we're whatever, corporate peon, like whatever it is, like, you're wearing all these different hats. And what I realized, I don't know if you experienced this as well, but like what I was going through was, it was like, sometimes I felt like I had like five hats stacked on top of me at one time. And I'm like, I don't know how to freaking do this. This is heavy. I don't know how to do this, because I was like, I knew who I was at work. I knew who I was as a mom. I knew who I was as a daughter. I knew who I was as a wife, but like, I didn't know what being Wendy felt like. And what I quickly realized was the only hat I needed was the Wendy hat. And that's who showed up in all these places, right? So instead of reaching for the hat that you need, it's like, well, what about your hat? All you need is your hat. Like, it's fashionable. It'll still be fashionable, right?
Yeah.
That's it. And, I used to brag about like, I can multitask. I am a perfectionist. Like, I am amazing. I can do all this.
Yeah.
And I look back and I'm like, wow, you did nothing well. And you weren't present.
Right.
I wasn't present in any area of my life because I had 15 other hats on at the same time. How can you be present?
I just had that image of, what was that? Was that a Dr. Seuss book with the man who wore all the
hats?
Yeah. So, oh my gosh. So you're a soul sister. I mean, everything you're saying can come out of my mouth. It's, and out of my experience, because yes. And especially again, as women, not to, ignore the men who are listening and watching, but as women, we are often, I don't know about you, but strong women, I guess, we tend to do everything. We're caretakers, we're nurturers, most of us. And so same thing. I mean, I, ran the entire household. I took care of the kids. I did the homework. I did the driving and the back and forth between the, sports and the this and the that and school and everything, and plan, paying the taxes and planning the trips. And I mean, it was all, something broke, I took care of getting it fixed, so it was like, at that point, at the end of my marriage, I felt very overwhelmed and very unhappy. And although I felt that I was good at all those things, kind of like you said, like I knew what my role as a mom was, I knew what my role as all these different roles in my business. But I felt so empty. And I when I started going into it, at the very beginning of my journey, I thought, wow, why do I feel so empty? What is it that is not, why do I not have joy in just being me? And then it hit me that who is me? Right? Yeah. So that is, I love that idea of pausing. And like you said, I too ignored a lot of this for a long time. Because again, opening that Pandora's box and going there and diving into yourself is really scary. And I don't know for me if it was as much scary as it was just an inconvenience. Like, this is just going to blow up everything. I've got a system. I've got it all under control. So I'm unhappy. I can keep going and everything will be fine type of thing.
Right. Well, it's thinking that content is enough.
Yeah.
And it's not. It just isn't. And until you get a taste of what, like, pure joy and bliss, like, call it whatever you want, is like, all of a sudden content is a bad word.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. So true. Wow. It's just so powerful. Let me just look at, I jotted down some things, but okay. So let's talk a little bit about the healing journey, healing from divorce. When you realize that you are, you do need to figure out me. Who is me? What does me want? What do I want? What is your advice to people when they're kind of on that precipice, like I was, of, and again, I hadn't analyzed it at that time. I hadn't gone into there and started diving into it, but I knew I wasn't happy. So at that point where you feel that something's off, like you said, whether it's in your gut, and me too, I hold everything in my gut, your gut, your heart, your whatever, you start having physical ailments. I mean, things are hurting. I mean, I went through that. I went through some really bad hip problems, which I later realized completely went away when I, made a decision, which was interesting to me. But when you are in the midst of that and you are coming to that realization that I am not happy, what do you do? You talk a little more about this pause, but what is actually, is there a procedure or something that somebody should do at that point? Like I didn't do, I ignored. What is that fine line between ignoring and moving forward? How to recognize that, and where do we start? And is there a place to start?
Yeah, the first place to honestly start is practicing mindfulness, which ultimately is kind of a multiple step process, right? It's the first step that has a couple steps within it. And when I talk about mindfulness, really what I mean by that is, like, we talk about being present with your emotions. And to me, that's really what mindfulness is all about. It's about getting present with what's there. It's allowing yourself, giving yourself permission to go into what doesn't feel good. And it's not about going into the piece of what doesn't feel good isn't well, he does this and he didn't do that. And he, or she, if she, whatever, that language is for you. It's not about them. This is about you. And I always say it takes two people to make a marriage work. Yeah. Two. So your healing is going to require you taking 100% ownership, accountability, and responsibility of your 50. It is not your responsibility to take on what they did or didn't do. It is about you. So the first thing in the mindfulness process is acknowledging your role and, honestly, your language. I hear 99% of the time when I start talking to somebody about their divorce or they're thinking about it. Well, he never, he does, he.
Yeah.
And we're so good at pointing the finger. And I was really good.
Blaming. And blaming makes us feel better because we're not accepting any of that responsibility.
Well, we think it makes us feel better.
Yeah. Temporarily.
It's the Band-Aid, right?
Because it's the non-recognition. It's
Correct.
Further, like you said, not just staying put and just, it gives you an out. It gives you an out. You feel like it gives you an out. Okay, well, it's not my fault. So.
Right. I didn't do this.
Yeah.
But then you get mad because they're not changing.
And
then
resentful.
It rolls into, resentment, bitterness, anger. And this is the hamster wheel that you've been on. So you've got to acknowledge that, number one, you're a finger pointer, right? You're pointing the finger at somebody else. You're putting the blame elsewhere. And you need to start pointing the finger at yourself. Okay.
Right.
This is going to look like how you showed up. Now, listen, I had nothing to do with his really bad choices that he made. That had nothing to do with me. That was on him. He had a million different ways he could have handled that.
Right.
He chose the way he chose. And I'm not even going to say he chose poorly. Those were his choices. He's got to live with them for the rest of his life. Similarly, I've got to live with mine.
Right.
I picked fights. I was mean to him. I was the worst version of me being married to him. And it all stemmed from I didn't know how to communicate. I didn't know how to share my feelings without blaming him.
Yeah.
And it really was hard for me because I'm like, I was avoiding, like, we blame to avoid facing what is going on within us.
I love
And
that.
so getting honest with yourself and acknowledging your role, acknowledging the judgments that you have, like, I felt awful. I was like, you're a horrible person, Wendy. Like, I remember having these conversations with myself. I'm like, wow, and it still makes me emotional because I am not proud of who I showed up as. I am not proud of who I was. But what I will tell you is, had I not gone through that, had I not gone through the healing and recovery process, I wouldn't be standing here today going, God, I get to do better next time. I get to learn how to communicate my feelings. I get to learn how to feel heard. And it doesn't mean raising my voice, and so the recovery and the healing as it relates to your intuition is like, stop avoiding what your intuition is telling you, which is like, you're part of why your marriage fell apart, Wendy. Like, his action is ultimately like the straw that broke the camel's back. Sure. But the back was broken already. And you were part of how it broke. Like, you were part of it. And so the mindfulness process of like acknowledgement, working through the judgments, leaning into the emotions, and then coming out on the other side with a different narrative. Like, ultimately, like, that first step is like the biggest one, and it takes the longest. Right. Everybody wants the, like, what is the 10-step process? Well, right. How about we just look at let's just break this down easy. Like, we're going from A to B right now. And from A to B, there's an A1, an A2, an A3, and an A4 before you even get to B. You're not going to get to Z. It's going to take you some time, right? Like, I mean, I could talk about something else, but I'm not going to go off on a tangent. But like, what I don't think people understand is, like, everyone's like, why isn't it working? Why am I not healed? Why am I still angry? It's been a week. Oh my God. How many years were you married? How many years have you been this version of yourself?
Right.
I was that version of me for 40 years, guys. Yeah. 40 years.
It's a deconstruction.
Yes. You are breaking it down to build it back up. And the way that I describe it is like, it's like, you've got to burn it down so that something can rise from the ashes, because it's not that I'm getting rid of those parts of myself, because she's still there. Like, she creeps in every now and then, and we reacquaint ourselves every now and then. Right. But the difference is that I know how to tame her. I know I have the tools, right? So I invite you guys to have grace and have compassion for yourself. Like, honestly, like, that's the second step after the mindfulness piece, is really about having self-compassion. You did your best with what you had. And guess what? You can add to your toolkit, right? I've had clients who go back into their marriages after doing this work with me, and they're thriving now. I have other clients who, it meant divorce. But like, my whole thing, I'm not pro-divorce. To me, what healing ultimately means is I'm pro you. Healing is about choosing yourself. It's about doing the work. It's about building up your toolkit. It's about investing in your transformation. Yes, I do believe it takes hiring somebody who has walked the path. That is the accelerator. Either you want the acceleration or you don't. I'm not here to judge you. You do you. But I don't know about you. Life is short. I don't have time to waste. I want to live my life. I want to be the best version of myself. And so I invest in myself. I invest in my coaches. I invest in doing the work. I invest in the transformation, because I want to get there as quickly as possible, because I have a lot of life to live. I've got a lot of lives to still change. I have a lot of impact that I still want to make. I have a legacy that I want to leave in this world. And if I sit here on my high horse and let my ego take over, I'm not going to get anywhere. I'm literally going to stay stuck on my hamster wheel. I may get off and have a drink of water every now and then, but I'm getting right back on. I may get on a different hamster wheel, but I'm back on it. And so it's really your recovery and the healing process. It's really about like, how badly do you want it? What does that path look like for you? Because it's going to get ugly. It's going to get not fun. Mm-hmm. But I'm telling you, growth is always on the other side of that discomfort. And I choose discomfort any day of the week. When I'm comfortable, I'm like, nope, something this comfortable is not good. Got to get uncomfortable. Like I got to go in.
Right.
You know, and I refer to that as like, you've hit a ceiling. Like when you're in comfort land, you've hit a ceiling because you're content.
Yeah.
So how do you shatter? How do you break through? How do you get to that next level? It's a constant, it's an evolution.
Yeah.
It's not a one and done. You're never done. I've never not had a coach for 7 years. I've always had a coach.
Yeah.
So, and I consider myself, I'm always healing, right? There's always something new I'm learning that's coming up. Like
we all are, all are. And that's, I think we have to realize that, right? That you can't just, you're not just going to, bam, heal from your divorce and you're happy. I mean, there will be more healing as you go through your next phase and your phase after that. So I love everything. You so beautifully summed all that up. Just about healing and what we want and trusting you, trusting myself and listening to yourself and knowing that the healing process is a process. It's not something you can just bam, how do I do it fast? What are my, 10 steps? And, in my book, I talk about all these things you can do, but if you go and you do all those things, you're not going to be healed. I mean, you're going to feel a lot better because you're going to explore you and know what you want. But again, like you said, we're always a work in progress. I love that idea about the glass ceiling and that being in that comfort zone, because that's really interesting. I've never thought about it that way, but if you look at it as, if you're riding in that zone for a while, what's going on? Because how can I change it up to be even a better version of me? Okay. So thank you. I mean,
you're welcome.
You're amazing. And this has been so informative and so much fun. And I feel like, we could keep talking for so much longer. I want to talk more. Maybe I'll have you back and we'll kind of go into like a version 2, version 2.0 of intuition and healing and joy and all those things. So thank you so much
for having me.
Will you share all of your contact information? So whoever wants to learn more about you, get in touch with you, watch your podcast, they can do so.
Yes. Thank you so much. Yeah. So first and foremost, yes, I am the host of the Power in the Pause podcast. So you can check me out on any social or podcast platform, And then I'm on all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok. Wendy Paige Sterling is my handle. So you guys can find me there. I've got some great resources on my website, which is wendypagesterling.com. And I encourage you guys to just, start letting yourself hear the messages that are coming in, like give yourselves permission to listen to what is coming in. And, it's amazing what can open up for you when you just start listening to that little voice inside that's just really trying to get you into your best and highest version of yourself and your best path. So hopefully you guys will get some of that good nuggets through my content and obviously through Rachel's as well.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Wendy. I really loved having you here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.